Bitcoin is being adopted by institutions, ETFs, treasury companies everywhere. But there's nothing like Bitcoin held yourself, self-custody, full sovereignty over your money. Today, we welcome Tony Yazbek of the Bitcoin Way. Tony, welcome to the show. What are people going to learn by the end of this episode about Bitcoin self-custody?
Well, how are you, Nick? Thank you for having me, first of all. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Bitcoin is the biggest revolution humanity has ever seen. It is the only money that is actually money once you understand what it is. The difference between Bitcoin and everything else that we've known our entire lives is that it's not issued by any government or central bank. It is backed up by math and cryptography, and no living soul can manipulate or corrupt the rules, which is why essentially it's the only money that I believe that the world will come to and eventually trust. What's so revolutionary about Bitcoin is that we can actually own it. Prior to this, the money that we thought we owned was not ours. We went to work, earned a paycheck, was told to put that paycheck in a bank and assumed it was safe. The reality is that that paycheck isn't money. It's a worthless piece of paper printed out of thin air by a bunch of people who have created the system to manipulate, control, and surveil. And furthermore, once you put it in that bank, it's no longer yours. A fact that a lot of people to this day still don't seem to, want to believe or understand. But we are witnessing the collapse of a legacy system. And so the realities of such a scenario, the pain that's usually associated with it, is the lesson that I believe a lot of folks are unfortunately going to have to learn in order to make it to the other side. Bitcoin is money. It's not an investment. It's not a stock. It's not something that you buy and hold for more worthless paper. It is the money itself. It is your ticket to freedom.
And at the Bitcoin layer, we often focus on the dollar system, global macroeconomics, and the necessity of a credit system. But that doesn't make what Tony says untrue, in that the dollar system is designed to steal from the holder that is not investing. So that makes the dollar not a good money. It is a credit system that the world does need to function. And that's something that we always try to emphasize when we describe these two systems next to each other. But Bitcoin as money is absolutely unique. It's something that the ability to own it, like you described, is unprecedented aside from only one asset, global asset in human history, and that's gold. And so the idea of Bitcoin as digital gold is something that I've been writing about since layered money. And I believe it's an important analogy in the basics, Tony, getting people to understand that you can keep a gold coin in your pocket. Nobody can dilute it other than Mother Earth, natural law, and nobody can seize it from you without a wrench attack. And Bitcoin is the only other asset in the world like that. Real estate doesn't come close. Of course, equities, definitely not bank deposits. And that's what makes Bitcoin a very unique money. So let's throw out the semantics, Tony, of the dollar as bad money or confiscatable and Bitcoin is good money. And let's just focus on Bitcoin, the asset.
Absolutely.
What does self-sovereignty do for people?
Self-sovereignty essentially sets you free. When you are the full owner of your money, you are not, bound by the rules of someone who has created a system, who has designed a system with no good intentions towards you. That is what the fiat system is about. It's a cage, essentially, that is, again, designed to control, censor, and surveil. That is all that it's about. And all the tools that are built on top of it are to ensure that people remain dependent on it. It's almost like a bad drug. Like you're born into it, and at some point you normalize it. You think that this is just the way things are until things get bad enough, and then you realize that something is really not sitting well with you. And unless you go through an extremity, like the way that I went through in the 2019 collapse of Lebanon, people still have too many people still have their rose-colored glasses on, and this is something that we're slowly starting to see erode globally. People are realizing that they can't afford much. They don't understand why. They're still going to work. Some people are, taking on 2 or 3 different jobs, and are still not being able to keep up with the increasing prices at the supermarket, for example. Why is that the case? Are these people, not intelligent anymore? Are they not working hard enough anymore? None of that is true. The reality is the money, that worthless piece of paper that we've been lied to believe has value, is being printed to oblivion, is being debased. Inflation is theft. So it's almost like a leaky bucket. You're trying to work and fill up that bucket, but the hole at the base is so large that there's no job or amount of jobs that you can take up in a 24-hour day that's going to keep up with the rate that it's leaking. That is the fiat system. The fiat system funds all of what's bad in the world. This is another reality that more folks are starting to wake up to. It funds wars. It funds genocides. It funds all sorts of the most heinous crimes and evil out there. How are these possible? It's possible because someone can hit a button, print an infinite amount of that funny money, and pay for it all, while the rest of us have to go out, slave from morning to night, give a large portion away of it, as taxes, another humiliation ritual, which is completely unnecessary because, whoever created that fiat system can simply hit a button and make that money. Why would they require taxation from the masses, right? So to me, that translates in a very specific manner. It is a way to keep you dependent on a system, to make you feel that you belong to something that is bigger than you. And that club, I think, has reached its expiration date. Not in a million years did they ever expect that something like Bitcoin would ever exist in this universe. But yet, in 2009, every once in a while, an idea whose time has come lands. And that's essentially what Bitcoin is. It was, the middle finger to centuries of corruption and abuse that has finally given a way for 8.3 billion people to take back what is rightfully theirs, their time and their energy. But the key to this all is owning the asset. Bitcoin wrapped in legacy finance is not Bitcoin. This is a narrative that the existing system is trying very desperately to push onto unsuspecting folks to take advantage of their ignorance, again, to keep them dependent on the very same people who have made their financial lives a living hell.
And the Bitcoin Way is a sponsor of the Bitcoin Layer. We appreciate your partnership, Tony, and it's been a pleasure to work with you. We want to point people to an outfit that can help them with self-sovereignty. It's something that we believe in. We've promoted self-custody methodologies over the last 4 years as a company because we want to point people to a place where they can achieve what Bitcoin was designed for. We talk about IBIT all the time also. We talk about the ETF craze. We talk about institutional capital, but promoting people to get control of their own Bitcoin is important to us. And so we'll put the link for a web event, a webinar free for you guys to attend Monday, June 22nd. That will be in the description. So come join us, learn about Tony's company, The Bitcoin Way, how they can help you with self-sovereignty. I'll let you talk about your company and introduce that to people. But before, I want to just give people an idea from my 2 books, Layered Money and Bitcoin Age. What have I written that agrees with what Tony is saying here? Because as a person from Lebanon and experienced what you experienced from the financial side of things and the monetary side of things, it's very unique and something that I have not experienced. So I want you to talk about that more. Layered money is first layer non-counterparty money, like gold only. And in Bitcoin Age, I called the credit system that Tony says is theft, I called it a mind trick, a Jedi mind trick, a mind trick that it makes you believe that the income you are earning is money, when in reality it is created by the push of a button and those with power. So the the understanding of what Bitcoin is, what the credit system is, you and I are in complete agreement. So tell us about your company, the Bitcoin Way. Why did you start it? What is it about? What inspired you to get into helping people with self custody?
After my collapse in 2019, and going, spending about 9 months surviving that, eventually, I stumbled upon Bitcoin properly and gave it the attention that it deserved. And it took me down a rabbit hole to understand why the collapse happened and who was responsible behind it. And then once you uncover that truth, your lens on the world changes. It does a complete 180, and you are not the same person anymore. As far as I'm concerned, my whole life has been a lie. I almost feel, very, very stupid to believe that someone who I consider very intelligent was actually suckered into, slaving for almost half my entire existence, and then literally overnight have someone else just swipe it from under me. We teach people the truth about money. We don't sell lies. We don't sell promises. We don't sell risk. We don't sell anything that is connected to the legacy system other than the education that helps people leave it. Bitcoin comes from the world of tech, and most people are petrified of that world because they believe perhaps they don't have the necessary skills in order to do it properly. But the one thing that everybody does remember is that if you make a mistake in Bitcoin, there's no help desk that you can call, and so the money is gone. And that is a legitimate and valid concern. And so what we do is that we walk and handhold everyone through the entire process. When I decided to put together the Bitcoin Way along with my partners, the objective here was pure education. You will never hear us talk about Bitcoin in any other form, shape, or way other than full self-custody. And we walk you through which hardware you need to use. We've curated them all. There's a lot of junk out there. We come from 30 years of cybersecurity. We know what's good. We test a lot of things. We try to blow them up, and only the ones that pass our highest levels of scrutiny are the products that we recommend. Our criteria is very specific. Open source or verifiable source, Bitcoin only. In the case of air-gapped wallets, never connects to a computer. Eliminates almost every possible form of cyber attack on the device itself, since it's never connected. We also teach people about how to protect their personal privacy online. And recently, we've also expanded to protecting the person themselves by providing options for jurisdictional sovereignty, because all of these things form the circle to the real pure sovereign individual. You protect your money, you own it yourself. You're no longer dependent on a system created to abuse you. There's no banks. You're the bank now. And this isn't something to fear. This is something to get really excited about because we've never had it before. And so the mindset of measuring Bitcoin's success by a dollar or a euro number has got to end, because this is what stirs up unnecessary emotional reactions from folks, which often leads to unnecessary loss. Bitcoin is the money itself. You interact with it peer to peer. No force in this universe can prevent you from using it. You don't need anybody's permission to engage in Bitcoin. You want to send somebody $1, you want to send somebody $1 billion. It's the same steps, point A to point B, 30-second process, it's done. So we teach people how that's done, how to set up your air-gapped wallet, how to set up your Bitcoin node, another necessity. All the prerequisites to becoming a sovereign individual is everything that the Bitcoin Way represent and everything that we teach here on a daily basis.
Can you talk more about your experience in Lebanon? What was that like?
My experience in Lebanon is a horror story that I pray to God nobody has to experience. I was financially retired in Lebanon. At least I thought I was. And then I went to bed one night and woke up the next completely homeless with about $70 or $75 to my name. Why? Because the banks decided to confiscate everybody's bank account. And that's it. There was no one to call, no one to visit. All the banks were closed, and you just had to go and figure it out. How that manifests itself is very, very ugly. I mean, you are literally catapulted back into the Stone Age within hours. There is no money, and the only way to communicate financially is through barter. And so the skills that are become instantly valuable are not the skills that you think they are. Like my skills, for example, my IT cybersecurity skills were worth a big fat zero because there was no need for them. The immediate skills were, like somebody who, like a baker, for example, a barber, very basic, go back to basic human instinct type of things, and you had to trade them. Like somebody would cut hair for a bag of tomatoes, for example. And the problem is, if you didn't have a skill that was in demand, what do? These are the things that I often don't talk about because they're very ugly and very dark. But what I can tell you is that in desperate situations, people resort to what comes to their minds instinctively. And people that you thought you knew your entire lives essentially turn into things you don't recognize. The rise of gangs, that's almost an automatic reaction to a system where everything has collapsed because people need to survive. When the food ran out in my kitchen, by default, I figured, all right, I'll go to the supermarket. But then I remembered, like, how am I going to pay for the goods? So I went anyhow. And my first visit there still gives me PTSD because there were hundreds of folks, if not thousands of folks, literally killing each other at that supermarket for whatever remaining stock was on the shelves. So unless, I was willing to go into a suicide mission, you decide to go on a diet and you leave, that environment pronto, and you figure out skills to keep you alive, essentially, from day to day. So this is the realities that very few people are willing to talk about for some bizarre reason when a system collapses. And Bitcoin, in my case, saved my life because about 9 months after going through a very dark period, I stumbled across an Andreas Antonopoulos video, and that was really my beacon of hope again, which made me smile for the first time in a very long time. The blood started flowing through my veins because I felt a sense of maybe it's not the end of the world. But again, coming from my background, I had to ground myself into not getting hyped up over some things just because I was desperate for answers. And so when you do the work, proper work, reading, asking the right questions, trying to destroy Bitcoin yourself, you understand that this is not a gimmick. It's not funny money. It's not something that's going to come and go. In fact, I learned that many governments over the last 17 years, with all their infinite resources, have religiously tried to destroy Bitcoin, and they failed. And so much so that they understand today that this is not going away, which is why they are adopting it. However, they don't want you to understand this and adopt it. They want the Bitcoin in self-custody to build whatever bullshit concoction they want on top of it in order to sell that to the ignorant masses in order to keep them dependent on them. Otherwise, their entire premise becomes irrelevant. That is, in my opinion, what corrupt governments and central banks are petrified the most of. Bitcoin in self-custody is a direct and imminent threat to their relevancy and existence. And it's a ticket to freedom to 8.3 billion people. In my opinion, more people are going to flock to Bitcoin properly because the situation around the globe is not getting any better. I mean, depending on where you are, things are either accelerating, in the wrong direction, or you can already see the signs on the wall. We see people who are leaving jurisdictions to better ones. We are seeing people who are rioting on the streets. We are seeing people complaining. People are not happy, no matter where you are. There's more rise in tensions. There's more rise in divisions. There's more rise in negativity. And at the base layer, the common denominator, with all of these things, is broken money. People are hungry. People are tired of having to struggle for something that they never had to previously. And so that's where there's a big gap in education. Like, we try to teach this to folks, but for some reason, centuries of brainwashing is not something that you're going to get someone to undo overnight. So it's a progress, but the world is doing the marketing for Bitcoin. The worse things get, the easier, Bitcoin, starts to make sense.
I want to ask you about Andreas Antonopoulos because he was one of the people that introduced the Bitcoin computer science aspect to me. I learned a lot from his book Mastering Bitcoin, and I would recommend anybody that has not read Mastering Bitcoin by Antonopoulos to do so, because you can actually see how Bitcoin works under the hood. That knowledge is power. Why didn't somebody in Lebanon introduce Bitcoin to you? Why did you have to find it online? It's a general question, because I want to understand what is the gap out there from reaching people and explaining them Bitcoin. Is it this volatility? Bitcoin is down 50%, Tony, over the last 6 months. How do you sell that drop in Bitcoin to somebody that's new? It is a challenge, and it's prevented many from getting involved in Bitcoin over the years. I know this because I actually don't try to convince new people. I'm reaching investors and people that are aware of Bitcoin. The brand new person to Bitcoin, I try to get, write a book for them 5 years ago, Layered Money, but it is very difficult to get people out of this mind trick.
That's a very good question, and it's something that I've been tormenting myself trying to answer. One of the main reasons for driving me out of Lebanon is the lack of reaction from the majority of citizens. We all got annihilated. Like, no one had anything left. It's not like some of us were fine and others were not. Everybody got massacred financially. Yet, what did everybody do? Nothing. You would think you'd get a little bit pissed, right, if somebody stole your entire life savings. But yet, what did the majority default to? How do I get another job? How do I make more dollars? How do I, spend more hours of the day working to make more dollars? Absolutely nothing learned from what just happened. Why? Is because you have blinders. It's almost like it's almost like, I don't know. It's like miraculous how no one understands or is curious to understand why something like this happens. And people's situations are so bad that they have immediate needs, which is why people in like financially comfortable countries have a privilege when they talk about Bitcoin. Like, that's why people in the West talk about Bitcoin as an investment. It's not an investment. Bitcoin is money. There is no volatility in Bitcoin. The volatility is something that is assumed because you're measuring money with a different form of money. The dollar price isn't a metric by which Bitcoin wins or loses. It's an exchange rate. So I like to give the analogy of Bitcoin being a country, and the Bitcoin is the currency. That's the currency of the country, and that currency is worth more than any other country's currency. I mean, when you earn a paycheck in U.S. dollars, do you care about what the Mexican peso's exchange rate is like, or the Indian rupee, or the Lebanese pound, or the Iranian rial? Like, do you look at these numbers? Of course not. Why? Because in your head, the U.S. dollar is money. But yet, the narrative being pushed out there is that Bitcoin is an investment. It's a store of value to make more dollars, which is why most people get wrecked, get emotional, make the wrong decisions, and end up losing their Bitcoin and assuming that it's a scam or a fraud or a Ponzi. None of that is true. And so this is part of the fundamental education that we try to push here. And once you understand that, Bitcoin is the simplest, easiest thing to adopt. You find ways to earn it. If you're making a fiat income, and after you've paid your immediate expenses in fiat, because most people are still living in that world, whatever is left, you can convert that, upgrade that actually to real money, Bitcoin. But you don't leave it on an exchange. You don't hire an institution to safeguard it for you. You don't buy a legacy product that gives you exposure to Bitcoin thinking you own Bitcoin. All of that is worth absolutely nothing. You have a direct link to the Bitcoin itself. You just need to learn how to use it, how to store it, how to save in it, and how to forget that the legacy system is actually money. As of 2009, I say this all the time, the entire legacy world has become optional for those who want to opt out of it and live into the future. I, along as millions of others like me, are living proof of this. Once you start earning Bitcoin and accumulating it in self custody, there's going to come a point where the dollar volatility doesn't matter. It's not like you're buying Lambos every week, but you're not worried about inflated prices because Bitcoin's value purchasing power is going in the opposite direction, which is giving you that ease financially that the dollar and the euro and other worthless piece of paper is not. So there's a lot to undo here. Again, I compare this to a really bad drug addiction. Most people think they need more of that drug to feel better, where in fact, that drug is essentially killing you. And so Bitcoin is weaning off of that bad drug. And once your system is cleansed from it, then everything becomes much easier. It's just having to go through this process of cleansing from a fiat world to a clean world based on sound money. And this is what the Bitcoin way is all about. And this is the education that we push on a daily basis. And the tides are turning. We were at Bitcoin Prague a few days ago. I can tell you in what most people consider a bear market, the signal was at an all-time high. The energy was more electric than any other year that I've witnessed at an event like this. More people are coming into Bitcoin the right way. They don't care about the dollar price. They don't care about the euro price. They just want to get out from under a system created to enslave and destroy your entire existence financially.
The transition from a fiat world to Bitcoin world can take years and be very complicated, multifactorial. In order to just go from a fiat to a Bitcoin denominated world altogether, it sounds nearly impossible, but there is a path and a blended route for everyone. I say that with experience. I have a blended approach in thinking about my family's finances and my business, the revenues that come in, the expenses that go out, they are blended. It's everyone has to find their own path. So tell people about what we're going to be talking about on Monday together in this free webinar.
We're going to be discussing some of the most exciting aspects about learning how to become your own bank. We're going to cover, what the right products look like, what the right process looks like, how anyone that has no tech skills can become pretty much a cybersecurity expert, so to speak, with regards to protecting their own money. And then once you get to that point of comfort, I'm almost 100% sure everyone is going to be like hitting their head wondering why they haven't done this previously. Learning how to transact in peer-to-peer electronic cash will become as instinctive as making a cup of coffee or getting in your car and driving. A lot of people assume they don't have options. Believe me, most of the world has a 5-star Rolls-Royce open buffet of options. I had no options in 2019 when Lebanon collapsed. Most people have plenty of options. It's just they need to get out of their own way and put their anxieties and fears at ease, and that only comes by learning the right messages, by absorbing the right information and not getting carried away by narratives that are being heavily pushed by those who don't want you to learn the truth.
The relative value of Bitcoin to dollars and income when it comes to the medium to long term, it's staggering. It took only 2.5 years of income to buy a home in the US in the 70s. Now it takes over 5. So double the amount of time to earn a house. Whereas Bitcoin, in Bitcoin terms, it's dropped from hundreds of Bitcoin for one home to now just a handful. And I would argue, Tony, that I know what you're saying about the dollar price and the euro price not mattering. And I agree that it's a sound approach to get involved and to think about Bitcoin. But over the long term, in the way that Bitcoin and earning in Bitcoin has to work for people, it does have to go up in dollar terms for the prices of everything else to go down for them in Bitcoin terms for it to work out. So it does matter. It is essential that people recognize the difference between something that dilutes itself and something that is appreciating against everything else benchmarked to the diluting asset. And so it's I want people to I write about this juxtaposition about the incomes to homes in Bitcoin age because you have to understand that your money is being diluted in dollar terms. Your income, your sweat, blood, and tears, your labor is being diluted. That is the dollar system. That is the fiat system. You have to battle it. And so you have to convert your labor into something that preserves over the long term. That's what Bitcoin empowers people to do. And it's an old concept. Investing your earnings is not a new concept, but converting your earnings or thinking of your labor in a different money, which Bitcoin allows people to do, is unique. It's unprecedented. It's of the digital age. It's global. It doesn't have borders. I think that's what makes your company special. It's truly international in its approach. Anybody can become a self-sovereign Bitcoiner with the right recipe. So tell people about where, what time we're doing this. We're going to have the link for people in the description on June 22nd.
June 22nd, you guys, you don't want to miss this. It's going to be very informative. Your questions, all of them are welcome. Write them down in advance, and like meet us during that webinar where we're going to cover, a lot of these, important details. For sure, you may have concerns, you may have comments, you may have, ideas in your head. You're more than welcome to share them. We will try to answer as many of them as possible. We are a neutral platform here. We are not sponsored by anyone. And so we remain, faithful to the Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ethos. You will never hear anything legacy coming out of the Bitcoin way. The only thing we care about is sovereignty. And we teach everything and anything, to ensure that you go from point wherever you are now into as becoming a fully sovereign individual, whether it's your money or your jurisdiction or your personal privacy online.
That's a free webinar, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern, Monday, June 22nd. Sign up for free in the description link. Tony Yazbek, co-founder of the Bitcoin Way. We appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. And please tell people where they can find out more about your company as well.
Thank you, Nick. Our website is thebitcoinway.com. We're extremely active on social media. My personal X Twitter handle is V4BTC. And of course, the company's is the Bitcoin Way _. You'll see a lot of our posts, on a daily basis, sometimes several times a day. I'm actively, engaging in a lot of podcasts and interviews and keynotes, whenever the opportunity arises. And of course, we're here to spread, the proper Bitcoin message that Bitcoin is money. And as long as it's decentralized and secure, it is the only money that the world is going to settle on because it's the only one it can trust.
If we can promote the idea of Bitcoin as a human right, that will do people well in understanding what it is. The simple fact that many people think Bitcoin is a company. This is a battle, an educational battle that we have to keep fighting. Tony, we appreciate your time. I'm Nick Bhatia, and we'll catch you guys next time.